It was the evening of July 3, 1992, humid, still, and unremarkable in every way. Officer Danielle Reyes, 29 years old, reported for duty at the Summit County Sheriff's Department just before 6 p.m. The office was quieter than usual. Many of the senior officers had taken time off ahead of the Independence Day weekend. That left a skeleton crew behind, mostly younger officers like Danielle, to patrol the surrounding areas. She didn't mind. She liked the quiet, and she took pride in handling her routes with diligence. She was dependable, always early, always prepared, always calm. Danielle had been with the department for almost 6 years and was considered a rising star. Though soft-spoken, she had a commanding presence, especially when it mattered. Colleagues respected her not because she was loud, but because she never backed down from the hard calls and never treated people like problems. A few weeks earlier, her captain had pulled her aside to discuss a pending promotion to sergeant. She hadn't told anyone yet, not even her parents, but the pride she felt walking into the station that evening was quietly blooming inside her. That night, she was assigned to patrol Riverview Road and the outer perimeter near Indigo Lake. It was a routine assignment, one she'd done dozens of times before. The area was largely wooded, with winding roads that curled through hills, thick brush, and the occasional cabin or farm on the edge of town. Indigo Lake, a deep man-made body of water, sat at the center of the county's most remote parkland. It was beautiful during the day and eerily quiet at night. Reyes knew the backroads well. She'd driven them during snowstorms, in the dead of night, and even once while evacuating a family during a flood. If anyone knew how to navigate that stretch in the dark, it was her. At 10:47 p.m., Reyes made a routine call to dispatch. "Dispatch, I've got what looks like an abandoned sedan off Riverview, just before the lake fork. No movement. I'm going to check it out," she said, her voice crisp and steady. The dispatcher responded with a simple, "Copy that, Unit 389. Keep us updated." It was the kind of call that happened a dozen times a week. Vehicles left behind by broken-down drivers, teens hanging out too long, or occasionally something more. But there was no sense of urgency in her tone, just routine. She turned onto the narrow shoulder road and slowed down. Trees crowded the path on one side, and the distant shimmer of the lake glinted faintly through them on the other. No other cars passed by, none were expected. Everyone in town was either asleep or out watching fireworks rehearsals at the fairground. The only light came from her cruiser's headlights and the faint red glow of her dashboard instruments. Outside, the forest was still. No one thought twice about that last transmission. There was nothing in her voice that hinted at concern, no background noise, no signs of a struggle. She sounded like she always did. Focused, calm, capable. But what happened in the minutes after that radio call has remained one of Summit County's longest-standing mysteries. Because that was the last time anyone ever heard from Officer Danielle Reyes. She didn't call back. She didn't return to the station. She didn't respond to dispatch when they tried again minutes later. Her cruiser disappeared, and so did she. What began as a quiet summer patrol on a forgotten back road would soon spark a decades-long mystery, one that would haunt a community, devastate a family, and remain unsolved until the day the lake gave her back. By 11:30 p.m., dispatch noticed something wasn't right. Officer Danielle Reyes, known for her punctuality and strict adherence to protocol, had missed her scheduled check-in. Initially, no one panicked. Officers sometimes got caught up in calls or dealt with distractions that pushed their responses back by a few minutes. But when 15 minutes turned into 30, and then an hour, concern began to creep in. Calls to her cruiser's radio went unanswered. Repeated attempts to reach her through the mobile unit system produced only silence. The dispatcher's tone shifted from casual to clipped and tense. By midnight, the Summit County Sheriff's Department had activated a search. The last thing anyone heard from Danielle was her brief transmission at 10:47 p.m. She had reported checking out an abandoned sedan on Riverview Road near Indigo Lake. It was a known spot for occasional car trouble, remote, winding, and easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. 2 deputies were dispatched to the scene. When they arrived, they spotted the sedan Reyes had mentioned, a faded maroon Buick Century with a flat tire and a crumpled front bumper. The vehicle was empty and cold to the touch, confirming it had been there for hours. But Reyes was nowhere to be found. Her cruiser was gone. Her flashlight was not found near the sedan. There were no drag marks, no broken branches, no blood, and no footprints leading anywhere. It was as if she had vanished from the road itself. The area surrounding Indigo Lake was notorious among officers, not for crime, but for its disorienting terrain. The lake sat like a black bowl at the base of thickly forested slopes, and the land dropped off steeply in several places. At night, the sound of the lake was swallowed by the trees and absorbed by the soft, mossy earth. Even a splash, if there had been one, would have gone unnoticed. Still, officers began searching the perimeter, flashlights sweeping through the brush, radio signals bouncing across static. They fanned out in all directions, checking ditch lines, roadside trails, and water edges. By 3 a.m., the entire department had been called in. Off-duty deputies, K-9 units, and even local volunteers responded to the station. The sheriff himself arrived on scene just after dawn. The concern was no longer theoretical. Danielle Reyes was officially missing in the line of duty. As word spread, the atmosphere in the station changed. The coffee stopped brewing. The usual banter between deputies gave way to grim silence. Everyone knew Danielle. She wasn't the type to take a risk without backup. She wasn't someone who'd flee or disappear without a word. She was steady, responsible, grounded. If something had happened, it wasn't a mistake. It was something else, something none of them could yet explain. By sunrise, Riverview Road had been sealed off, and search teams extended their radius out to the lake's southern and western borders. Boats with floodlights skimmed the surface, while officers waded along the banks and peered down the steep slopes. Still, nothing. The only thing that remained behind was the abandoned Buick and a growing sense of dread. That first day ended with no progress, and worse, no clues. The next morning, helicopters joined the effort, scanning the forest canopy and lake surface from above. A diver team was called in from the neighboring county, but limited visibility and deep shifting silt made underwater searching slow and uncertain. The technology available in 1992 was primitive by today's standards. No drones, no heat tracking, no sonar mapping. What couldn't be seen by flashlight or touched by hand was simply inaccessible. And so, the mystery deepened. No tire tracks, no dropped radio, no sign of a struggle. Her cruiser hadn't pinged any traffic cameras on its way out, because it had never left. It was as if the road itself had opened up and swallowed her whole. By nightfall on July 4th, just as fireworks lit the sky in celebration across town, the Summit County Sheriff's Department had begun to quietly fear the unthinkable. Danielle Reyes had vanished without a trace, and no one could explain how. News of Officer Danielle Reyes' disappearance spread like wildfire through Summit County within hours of the official search announcement. The small town, tight-knit and usually quiet, was suddenly gripped by a wave of worry and disbelief. Flyers bearing Danielle's photo and badge number were printed and plastered on every telephone pole, storefront, and community bulletin board. Residents gathered at town halls and churches to organize search parties, volunteers eager to do whatever they could to help find the missing officer. The local radio and TV stations ran continuous coverage, updating listeners and viewers on the ongoing search. Helicopters circled low above the treetops and the shimmering surface of Indigo Lake, casting long shadows on the forest floor. The entire county, from the highest officials down to school children, was united in hope and fear. Danielle's family became the face of the crisis. Her mother, Maria Reyes, appeared on the evening news, clutching a faded photograph of her daughter, tears brimming in her eyes as she begged the public for any information. "Please, if anyone knows anything, come forward," she said, voice trembling but resolute. Her father, Jorge Reyes, stood silently by her side, his usually stoic demeanor cracked by worry. The local churches held prayer vigils, filling pews with mourners who lit candles and prayed for Danielle's safe return. The emotional toll on her parents was palpable, their hope hanging by a fragile thread as days turned into weeks. Within the Summit County Sheriff's Department, the impact was profound and deeply personal. Danielle wasn't just a colleague, she was family. Many deputies had trained alongside her at the academy, recalling her sharp instincts and steady hand under pressure. She had been the first to volunteer for extra shifts and was known for mentoring newer officers. The patrol squad room, once filled with lighthearted banter and camaraderie, was now subdued. Officers exchanged worried glances, some silently replaying their last encounters with her, others struggling to focus on their duties. The captain ordered a halt to non-essential patrols so personnel could assist in the search, and many officers took leave to be with their families or support Danielle's loved ones. It was as if the entire department was holding its breath, waiting for news that wouldn't come. As the days went on, the community's response remained steadfast. Candlelight vigils began to line the courthouse steps each evening, candles flickering in the summer breeze. Local businesses donated supplies and funds for the search efforts, and schools organized letter-writing campaigns to encourage Danielle's family. Children colored posters and sent drawings, hoping to remind the officers and volunteers that the town was united in its prayers. Fundraisers brought in thousands of dollars to cover the costs of helicopters, dive teams, and search equipment. Every person in Summit County, from the mayor to the mail carrier, seemed to carry a part of Danielle's story with them. Despite the widespread support and resources, the search yielded frustratingly little. Days of combing through woods, scanning lake shores, and diving into murky water failed to uncover any sign of Danielle. Each lead, each tip from hopeful witnesses, eventually ran cold. The media, initially relentless in its coverage, began to move on, focusing on other stories as the weeks dragged on without a breakthrough. Headlines that once screamed, "Officer vanishes without a trace," grew quieter, shrinking to small updates buried in local sections. Danielle's name, once on everyone's lips, slowly began to fade from the public conversation. Summer faded into fall, and with it, the optimism that had fueled the frantic early days of the search. The leaves changed color and began to fall, blanketing the forest floor where officers had once combed desperately. Danielle's parents kept vigil at home, holding on to the hope that their daughter might still be found alive. They refused to remove her belongings from her room, which remained exactly as she had left it. Her uniform hanging neatly, her boots lined up by the door, her favorite books stacked on the nightstand. But with each passing day, the silence grew heavier. Though the case had captured statewide attention initially, the lack of evidence or leads meant it was soon overshadowed by newer stories. Other missing persons, local crimes, and everyday news pushed Danielle's disappearance off the front pages. The department shifted its focus to other cases, but Danielle's file remained open, a quiet reminder of the unsolved mystery that lingered in Summit County's collective conscience. For many, the unresolved case became a haunting presence, a reminder of how fragile life could be, and how easily someone could vanish without explanation. Danielle Reyes, once a beacon of hope and dedication, had disappeared into the night, and for now, she remained lost to those who loved her most. In the weeks and months following Officer Danielle Reyes' disappearance, the Summit County Sheriff's Department and local detectives threw everything they had into the investigation. Detectives meticulously followed up on every lead, no matter how small or improbable. Tip lines flooded with calls from concerned citizens, friends, and even strangers who believed they had information. Some tips came from those claiming to have seen a suspicious vehicle near Indigo Lake. Others hinted at shadowy figures lurking in the woods. But the vast majority were little more than rumors and wishful thinking, theories woven together by the community's desperation for answers. Among the more persistent theories was the idea that Danielle had stumbled upon something she was never meant to see, an illegal operation, a hidden stash of drugs, or corrupt dealings that involved powerful people. Whispers of a cover-up began to spread quietly at first, then more loudly as frustration mounted. Some speculated that a rogue officer within the department might have been involved, someone who wanted to silence her before she could expose the truth. These rumors haunted the precinct, unsettling even the most seasoned officers who had worked alongside her. But as thorough as the investigation was, No hard evidence emerged to support any of these dark stories. Another rumor, whispered in corners and behind closed doors, suggested that Danielle might have chosen to disappear on her own. Some believed she had staged her vanishing to escape the pressures of the job or a troubled personal life. This theory, however, didn't fit with the woman everyone knew. Those closest to her insisted she had no reason to flee. She loved her job, had no history of trouble, and was deeply committed to her family and community. Even so, without any solid leads, such speculation lingered in the background, muddying the search for facts. The detectives expanded their investigation beyond Summit County. They reached out to neighboring jurisdictions, checking for reports of missing persons matching Danielle's description or her vehicle. Surveillance footage from the nearby highways and towns was reviewed, but in 1992, security cameras were scarce and footage was grainy at best. There were no sightings of her patrol cruiser anywhere outside the last known location. Phone records, limited in scope compared to today's technology, revealed no unusual calls or contacts around the time of her disappearance. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and the once intense public interest began to wane. The case file grew thicker, filled with witness statements, expert reports, and maps marking search areas, but it only deepened the mystery. For every lead that came in, 2 more seemed to fizzle out. The search teams combed the surrounding forest repeatedly, dragged the lakebed multiple times with increasingly sophisticated equipment, but never found the smallest trace. No evidence of foul play, no indication of a struggle, no signs of Danielle or her cruiser. The lack of physical evidence frustrated everyone involved. Investigators felt as though they were chasing shadows, the mystery growing colder with each passing day. The sheriff's department held periodic press conferences, appealing for information, promising renewed efforts. But the community's hope, once so vibrant and fierce, slowly began to fade. Danielle's name was mentioned less and less in the news. The vigils stopped. The flyers faded and were torn down by the elements or taken down as families moved on. Despite the growing distance from the disappearance, the department never officially closed Danielle's case. It was one of those files that sat in the cold cases drawer, alongside others that had baffled law enforcement for years. Every few months, an officer would revisit the file, hoping for a fresh perspective, a new technology that might reveal what had been hidden before. But time was unforgiving. Memories faded, witnesses moved away or passed on, and the trail grew colder. Years later, when the digital age introduced advances in forensic science and investigative tools, the department tried to reopen the case with new technology. They re-examined the old physical evidence, scoured new databases, and even offered rewards for information. But still, nothing came to light. The case became a symbol of an unsolvable tragedy, a cautionary tale whispered among officers and residents alike. What had happened to Officer Danielle Reyes? How did a dedicated, careful patrol officer disappear without a trace in the span of a single night? Without answers, the questions piled up, unanswered and haunting. Her cruiser was never found, her body never recovered, and the silence remained unbroken. The investigation into her disappearance had gone cold, leaving behind only a growing pile of unanswered questions and a community forever changed by the mystery. As the years slowly passed, the community of Summit County tried to find some semblance of normalcy, but the absence of Officer Danielle Reyes left a quiet, persistent scar. Life around Indigo Lake and the stretch of Riverview Road continued as it always had, with the rhythms of daily life, school buses rumbling by, families picnicking near the shore, and fishermen casting lines into the water. Yet beneath the surface of this calm, Danielle's disappearance remained an unspoken wound, a shadow hanging over the community that refused to fully heal. New deputies joined the Summit County Sheriff's Department, fresh recruits eager to serve but unaware of the deep history connected to that stretch of road. For many, the name Danielle Reyes was just a footnote in training materials or a faded plaque on the station wall. The old patrol route she had traveled that night became unofficially known as Reyes Hollow, a quiet nod among those who remembered the mystery that haunted the county. Some of the newer officers had never even heard the story firsthand, yet they felt its weight through the hushed conversations and respectful silence that filled the precinct. For Danielle's parents, however, time stood still. Maria and Jorge Reyes never left their home near the edge of town. They refused to change their phone number or move away, clinging to the hope that someday their daughter might call or walk through the door. Their lives became a testament to patient endurance. Maria kept Danielle's bedroom exactly as she had left it on that summer night in 1992. The bed was made perfectly. The badge Danielle had pinned to her dresser lay untouched, and her patrol jacket hung in the closet, suspended in time. Every item was a quiet shrine, a way to keep Danielle's presence alive in their daily routine. Jorge's evenings followed a quiet ritual. Each night, as the sun dipped below the horizon, he sat by the living room window that faced Riverview Road. From that vantage point, he could see the road Danielle had patrolled and the distant glimmer of Indigo Lake's surface. He would watch for any sign of her, any headlights, any figure walking down the street. Friends and neighbors often stopped by to check on him, but Jorge remained silent, focused on the hope that never quite faded. To him, Danielle was still out there somewhere, lost but not gone. Within the department, former officers who had served alongside Danielle kept her memory alive. Every July 3rd, the anniversary of her disappearance, a small group would gather at Indigo Lake to remember her. They brought flowers, lit candles, and shared stories of the woman they had known, a dedicated officer with a warm smile and an unwavering sense of justice. These gatherings were private, quiet moments away from the public eye, a way to honor their lost colleague and friend. Though she had vanished decades ago, Danielle's spirit lingered among those who had known her best. The community's response to the annual remembrance was mixed. Some residents joined in solidarity, feeling a shared sense of loss and respect. Others preferred to let the past remain buried, uncomfortable with reopening old wounds. But for Danielle's family and friends, the day was a sacred reminder that her story was not over. It was a way to keep her memory from fading entirely into obscurity. Even the physical landscape seemed to hold on to her memory. Locals spoke quietly about the eerie stillness around Reyes Hollow, the way the trees seemed to lean closer, the whispers of the wind sounding like echoes of Danielle's footsteps. The lake itself became a symbol of mystery and unresolved grief, a dark mirror reflecting the unanswered questions that surrounded her disappearance. Visitors were often warned to tread carefully, not just out of respect, but out of an unspoken sense of caution. Life moved on for most, but not for everyone. For Maria and Jorge Reyes, for the officers who patrolled those lonely roads, and for the community that once held hope for a miracle, Danielle's absence was a constant presence. It was a silent thread woven into the fabric of their lives, a reminder that sometimes even time itself can't heal every wound. She had vanished one summer night, but she had never truly left. In the spring of 2013, after over 2 decades of silence, an unexpected natural event set the stage for a startling discovery. That year, Summit County experienced one of its driest seasons in recorded history. A persistent drought gripped the region, sending rivers and lakes into retreat. Indigo Lake, a serene body of water nestled beneath dense forests and rolling hills, was no exception. Over the course of several weeks, the water level dropped dramatically, more than 6 feet below its usual mark, revealing parts of the shoreline and lake bed that had remained submerged for decades. As the muddy banks stretched farther out, longtime locals noticed the sudden appearance of familiar, yet forgotten sights. Tangled roots of ancient trees, long submerged branches, and forgotten debris surfaced from the murky depths. What had once been invisible beneath the dark waters now lay exposed, eerily still. The natural retreat of the lake unveiled a landscape frozen in time, a quiet testament to the years that had passed. On one warm afternoon, a father and his young son came to fish at the northern shore of Indigo Lake, a favorite spot for local anglers. They cast their lines from the rocky edge, enjoying the peaceful rhythm of the water lapping gently against the shore. Suddenly, the boy spotted something unusual beneath the surface, a metallic glint reflecting the sunlight in a way that didn't belong. Curious but cautious, the father leaned closer, squinting through the murky water. At first, they thought it might be a sunken boat or some old fishing equipment lost to time. Unsure, they decided to report the sighting to the Summit County Sheriff's Department, not realizing how profound their discovery would soon become. The local authorities responded quickly, dispatching the Summit County dive team to investigate. The divers arrived equipped with sonar equipment and underwater cameras, ready to search the lakebed for any objects that might pose a hazard or hold significance. As they descended beneath the surface, the murky water quickly gave way to an unsettling sight. Partially buried under layers of silt, algae, and sediment, they found what appeared to be a rusted vehicle, its familiar shape unmistakable. Closer inspection revealed a Crown Victoria police cruiser, a model widely used in the early 1990s. Its once bright blue and white paint was faded and corroded, but the distinctive decals of the Summit County Sheriff's Department were still visible, albeit barely legible. The cruiser was remarkably well preserved, almost frozen in time by the cold, still waters. The vehicle sat at an odd angle near the lakebed, as if it had slipped off the road and into the water without anyone noticing. There were no signs of external damage or collision, only the silent testimony of years underwater. With careful precision, the dive team prepared to open the vehicle. As they cracked open the door, an unimaginable scene greeted them inside. Still seated behind the wheel, buckled into the patrol cruiser's driver's seat, was Officer Danielle Reyes. Her body was remarkably intact, preserved by the cold lake waters, frozen as though caught in the moment she disappeared more than 20 years earlier. Her patrol uniform, once vibrant and full of life, was now a muted blue-gray. Her badge lay on her chest, catching the faint light filtering through the water. It was as if time had stopped within the confines of the car. The discovery sent shockwaves through Summit County. News spread rapidly, reigniting the grief and questions that had lingered for decades. Families, officers, and residents who had tried to move on were forced to confront the haunting truth once again. How had Danielle ended up at the bottom of Indigo Lake? And why had her vehicle, and her, remained hidden for so long? Authorities immediately launched a renewed investigation into the circumstances surrounding her death. Forensic experts and underwater recovery specialists were called in to document the scene and retrieve the cruiser and her remains with the utmost care. The delicate operation was covered extensively by the media, with cameras and reporters flocking to the lake's edge. The community gathered in disbelief, some silently mourning, others searching for answers. The questions poured in. Was the disappearance a tragic accident? Had she lost control of the cruiser on a dark stretch of road? Or was there something more sinister lurking beneath the surface of the lake and the mystery that had remained unsolved for over 2 decades? As the investigation reopened, the community braced itself for the truth, whatever it might be. Indigo Lake, once a quiet witness to the past, had revealed its long-kept secret. In doing so, it reignited a spark of hope for closure and justice, even as it deepened the sorrow for a life lost too soon. As the Summit County dive team completed their initial survey, heavy machinery was brought in to carefully retrieve the rusted Crown Victoria cruiser from the muddy depths of Indigo Lake. The operation drew an unexpected crowd, curious locals, somber law enforcement officers, and an eager group of news crews lined the shoreline, cameras poised to capture the unfolding moment. The usually tranquil lakefront buzzed with activity and tension, the atmosphere thick with anticipation and a lingering sense of sorrow. This was the first time in over 2 decades that anyone had seen tangible evidence of Officer Danielle Reyes. Slowly, with meticulous care, the tow cables tightened around the cruiser's frame. Inch by inch, the submerged vehicle was lifted from the murky waters, dripping decades of cold lake water as it broke the surface. The once polished blue and white patrol car, now rusted and covered in algae, revealed its haunting presence to the waiting crowd. The muffled sound of the crane and the water dripping from the vehicle seemed to echo the long silence that had enveloped this mystery for so many years. Inside the cruiser, the dive team discovered skeletal remains still seated behind the wheel. The uniform was tattered and worn, a testament to years submerged beneath the cold lake, yet it remained identifiable. The familiar badge and insignia clung to the faded fabric, quietly proclaiming the identity of the officer who had vanished all those years ago. It was Danielle Reyes, still there, still present in the place where time had seemingly stopped. Her hands rested near the steering wheel, her posture frozen in an eerie calm, as though she were simply waiting for someone to arrive. Nearby, the officers found her personal effects just as she had left them. Her radio lay on the passenger seat, the buttons and knobs covered in rust but intact. A small notebook, soaked and stained from years underwater, remained open on the dashboard, its pages fragile, but still visible under the glass. The pistol, securely holstered, hung by the driver's side door, a stark reminder of the life she had led and the duty she had carried. These items, untouched for more than 2 decades, spoke volumes about the suddenness of her disappearance. Forensic experts were called in immediately to confirm her identity. Through dental records, DNA testing, and examination of the uniform, the conclusion was clear. The remains belonged to Officer Danielle Reyes. The medical examiners also worked to determine the cause of death. After careful study, they ruled out foul play. There were no signs of trauma, no evidence that she had been attacked or involved in a struggle. Instead, it appeared that she had died from injuries sustained in an accident, most likely a crash or slide into the lake. The investigation revealed new details that had eluded authorities in 1992. The cruiser had veered off the narrow, winding road that ran alongside Indigo Lake. The incline was steep and covered in thick brush and trees, which had hidden the crash site completely from view. To passers-by on the road, there was no indication that a vehicle had gone off the edge. The dense foliage and natural terrain had concealed the cruiser for more than 20 years, making it invisible even to the most thorough searches. Officials speculated that poor visibility and road conditions on that fateful July night might have contributed to the crash. Perhaps a sharp turn, slick pavement, or a momentary lapse in focus caused the vehicle to skid down the embankment and into the water. Once submerged, the cruiser settled into the soft lake bed, where silt and sediment quickly covered it, preserving the scene for decades. For the community and her family, the discovery was bittersweet. After 21 years of searching, wondering, and hoping, Danielle Reyes had finally been found. The lake had given her back, but only as a silent reminder of the tragedy. The mystery of her disappearance was no longer a question of where, but rather a solemn reckoning with how and why. Her return sparked renewed grief, but also a measure of closure that had been missing for far too long. In the days that followed, memorials and ceremonies were held to honor her memory. Officers stood shoulder to shoulder, their uniforms crisp and badges shining, paying respect to the fallen colleague they had never truly lost. For Danielle's parents, friends, and the community, this moment brought a mixture of sorrow and peace. A chapter finally closed, but never forgotten. The road alongside Indigo Lake was no longer just a quiet stretch of pavement. It was a place marked by loss, mystery, and the enduring spirit of a dedicated officer who gave everything in the line of duty. After 2 decades, Summit County had finally found its missing daughter. With the cruiser finally recovered from Indigo Lake, law enforcement officials wasted no time in reopening the investigation into Officer Danielle Reyes' disappearance. The new evidence provided crucial clues that hadn't been available during the initial search more than 20 years prior. Forensic teams meticulously documented every detail of the vehicle and its surroundings, reconstructing the likely series of events on that fateful night in July 1992. The long silence surrounding the case was suddenly filled with answers, but also with new questions about how such a tragedy could have remained hidden for so long. Investigators learned that on the evening of her disappearance, Danielle had been patrolling alone along Riverview Road, a winding stretch that ran parallel to Indigo Lake. When she radioed dispatch about the abandoned sedan near the woods, it was believed she intended to circle around the vehicle to inspect it more closely. Recent analysis suggested she took an old, seldom-used service path, a narrow shoulder off the main road that skirted the steep embankment leading down to the lake. The path was known to be poorly maintained and treacherous, especially after dark. Under the cloak of night, and with limited visibility, it appeared that the edge of the shoulder gave way beneath her cruiser's weight. The soft earth, weakened by time and weather, crumbled silently beneath the tires. The vehicle then slid slowly but inexorably down the slope, eventually plunging into the dark waters of Indigo Lake. The angle of the incline, combined with the thick brush and trees that lined the shore, rendered the crash site nearly invisible from the main road. This hidden spot was a cruel and silent grave, far from any witnesses or signs of struggle. No splash or noise had been heard that night to alert nearby residents or fellow officers. The lake's surface was calm, muffling the sound of the cruiser's descent. In the chaos of a busy holiday weekend, her absence went unnoticed for hours until she missed her scheduled check-ins. The initial search, though thorough for its time, had failed to account for the possibility that the vehicle could have slipped so quietly into the lake, concealed beneath the natural landscape. The renewed investigation ruled the accident purely tragic and accidental. There was no evidence to support any theories of foul play or conspiracy that had circulated in the years following her disappearance. The suspicions that Danielle had uncovered corruption, or that she had been targeted by a rogue officer, were ultimately unfounded. Instead, it was a series of unfortunate circumstances, a crumbling road shoulder, the darkness of night, and the hidden terrain, that sealed her fate. Detectives examined the original search efforts and identified a critical oversight. The area where the cruiser had ended up was never thoroughly searched underwater, largely because the lake's depth and murkiness made it a difficult environment to explore in 1992. At the time, the technology and resources available to the sheriff's department were limited compared to modern standards. This gap in the search had allowed the vehicle and Danielle to remain hidden for more than 2 decades, prolonging the mystery and the community's pain. For the families and fellow officers, the reopened investigation provided a sense of resolution, but also underscored the tragedy of lost time. The question of what truly happened on that lonely road was answered, yet it could not undo the years of grief and unanswered questions. The revelation offered closure, but also reminded everyone of the fragility of life and the sometimes cruel twists of fate. Summit County, once haunted by the unexplained disappearance of one of its own, could now finally lay the case to rest. The memory of Officer Danielle Reyes would live on, honored not only for her dedication and bravery, but also as a somber reminder of the dangers inherent in the job she loved. The community slowly began to heal, knowing the truth at last, and vowing never to forget the woman who had vanished one night and was found 21 years later, silent but not forgotten. Officer Danielle Reyes was finally laid to rest with full honors, in a ceremony that drew community members, law enforcement personnel, and family from far and wide. The church where the service was held was filled to capacity, with every pew occupied by those who had been touched by her life and her tragic disappearance. Former partners and colleagues from the Summit County Sheriff's Department, including retired sheriffs and deputies, stood solemnly in uniform, their faces etched with a mixture of sorrow and respect. Civilians who had followed her story over the years also came to pay their respects, reflecting the deep impact Danielle's story had on the entire community. Her casket was draped in a crisp American flag, symbolizing her dedication to service and country. As the ceremony unfolded, stories of her quiet strength, her unwavering sense of duty, and her kindness were shared by those who knew her best. A former partner spoke of the last patrol they had shared, recalling her professionalism and her quick instincts. Another recounted the countless ways she had gone above and beyond to serve the community, often volunteering her time for youth programs and local events. The memories served to remind everyone that Danielle was more than just a badge number. She was a person, a daughter, a friend, and a protector. One of the most poignant moments came when the department officially retired her badge number, 389, a gesture reserved only for officers who have made the ultimate sacrifice. The retirement of the number ensured that no other officer would carry that badge again, preserving her legacy within the department forever. It was a symbolic way to honor her memory and the indelible mark she left on those she served with. In addition to the funeral, the county commissioned a permanent memorial at the northern edge of Indigo Lake, overlooking the very spot where her cruiser had been found after more than 2 decades. The memorial, a simple yet powerful stone monument engraved with her name, dates of service, and the department's insignia, stood as a quiet sentinel beside the lake. The site became a place of reflection and remembrance, where family, friends, and fellow officers could come to pay tribute to Danielle's life and sacrifice. Since then, every year on July 3rd, marking the anniversary of her last shift, officers and community members gather at the memorial for a ceremony of remembrance. They leave flowers, coins, and handwritten notes, tokens of respect and connection that honor her memory and her service. The gatherings serve as a reminder that although Danielle Reyes was gone, her spirit remained alive in the hearts of those who knew her and in the community she had sworn to protect. The stretch of road where Danielle vanished was officially renamed Reyes Hollow Road by the county. The renaming was a deliberate act to keep her story alive in the public consciousness and to ensure that future generations would remember the sacrifice of an officer who gave everything in the line of duty. Road signs bearing her name now stand as daily reminders to drivers and residents that this was more than just a piece of asphalt. It was a place marked by loss and courage. Her sacrifice, once a haunting mystery, was no longer a question or a rumor. It was a legacy firmly established in Summit County's history. Officer Danielle Reyes' story became a symbol of dedication, resilience, and the enduring bond between law enforcement and the communities they serve. Through memorials, ceremonies, and the collective memory of a grateful community, her life continued to inspire and remind others of the cost of service and the power of remembrance. Inside the quiet, solemn halls of the Summit County Law Enforcement Memorial, a special tribute stands in honor of Officer Danielle Reyes. The display is carefully curated, reflecting the life and service of a woman whose story touched the entire community. Behind a thick glass case rest her preserved badge, worn uniform, and patrol cap, each piece a symbol of her dedication, frozen in time. Next to these items is a large photograph of Danielle, captured in a rare moment of warmth and joy, smiling broadly as she leaned against her cruiser just days before her disappearance. Visitors often pause here, drawn not just by curiosity, but by the palpable presence of a life interrupted, a story unfinished. A soft looping audio plays in the background, adding a haunting layer to the memorial. It is the voice of Danielle herself, calm and professional. "Dispatch. I've got what looks like an abandoned sedan. I'm going to check it out." Those words, spoken on July 3rd, 1992, have echoed through the years, carrying with them a mixture of hope, fear, and unanswered questions. After that transmission, there was only silence, an eerie, unsettling void that haunted everyone who knew her, and everyone who heard the story. For 21 long years, that silence lingered in the hearts of her family, fellow officers, and the community she served so faithfully. But now, the silence holds a new meaning. It no longer represents uncertainty or loss alone. It has transformed into a symbol of closure, remembrance, and a quiet form of justice. The mystery that had enveloped her disappearance has been finally unraveled, bringing peace to those who waited and wondered. While her body was found in the depths of Indigo Lake, her spirit remains alive through the memories of those who honor her every day. The last transmission, once a haunting echo, now serves as a tribute to a life lived with courage and commitment. The memorial also serves a greater purpose, to remind current and future generations of the sacrifices made by law enforcement officers who walk the line between danger and duty every day. Danielle's story, though tragic, is one of bravery and perseverance, a testament to the risks inherent in the job and the humanity behind the badge. Visitors leave the memorial not only with a sense of solemn respect, but also with an understanding of the profound cost of service. For her family, the memorial is both a place of mourning and healing. Her mother and father often visit, finding solace in the knowledge that Danielle's legacy endures beyond the confines of grief. They have said that hearing her voice one last time, even through a recording, reconnects them with the daughter they lost too soon. It is a reminder that despite the years, the bond of love and memory remains unbroken. Among her fellow officers, the memorial is a rallying point for camaraderie and remembrance. The badge she wore is not just a piece of metal, but a symbol of the dedication, sacrifice, and integrity that defined her career. It is a tangible reminder of the woman behind the uniform who vanished while doing her duty and was finally brought home after decades of searching. The audio of her final radio call echoes softly, a testament to her professionalism and bravery in the face of the unknown. Though Officer Danielle Reyes never returned from that night, her story is far from forgotten. It lives on in this memorial hall, in the hearts of the people she served, and in the roads and ceremonies that bear her name. The silence that followed her disappearance no longer isolates her memory. It amplifies it, ensuring that the quiet voice of a dedicated officer continues to be heard and honored. Danielle Reyes didn't run from danger or fear. She faced it head-on, fulfilling her duty until her very last breath. Her story reminds us all of the quiet courage it takes to serve and protect, even when the path ahead is uncertain.